G'day class users. This is a basic introduction to the newly announced do-it-yourself reports that we're pretty excited to tell you about. Essentially, it's the third form of class report. It allows you to build tailor-made reports from essentially a drag and drop interface. It's like a simplified version of the DQS from the old database Silsys. So those of you who have been around will know the flexibility of that, except for this, DIYs, you don't need code. So we can do all kinds of things in all sorts of ways. Things like sum or critical information, like clients, services, actions, and then like filter them in various ways. You can do outputs by time periods or say sub-time periods, like say a week divided by each day or a year divided by each month. We can also do rolling date ranges, like give me last financial year or the financial year before that or last week, and save it as last week. Every time you open the report, it'll pull up last week's, say, date range. And all standard and custom fields in class are available. Before we jump in and go crazy, planning is really essential. For example, what you may need may already be in existing reports. We know that a lot of people don't know the details of the latest reports and how you can do demographic breakdowns and administrative boundaries and things like that. So really do your research and check it out first. We really encourage you to plan things out carefully. Have a really good think about where you want everything in the report to be, you know, where your rows are, your columns, or what things are grouped by. If you get it wrong and you're not really sure where and you're just throwing field in the wrong place, you could be a really slow load. You could really suck resources as well from everybody else who's using reporting at the same time. And you actually could end up with a completely wrong count because you're putting the wrong fields in the wrong places. And particularly, we're concerned we don't just run huge date ranges, you know, like 10 years, unless you know exactly that the thing is running as it should be. So we always suggest, you know, pick a really small date range just to test it first. So it might be a week or a month when you know there's going to be some results. Test your system, make sure it's working, and then save it, and then open up to the full date range that you want when you've got just the data you need. A really good idea is to run your idea past help desk. They'll be able to give you some tips, maybe help you and tell you where the best place to do things might be. So I'll quickly show you, you know, how we can remind you of standard reports, drill down reports, and now the new ones, DIYs, which are kind of mega drill downs. And the way we're doing it is presenting things in templates and recipes. What are they? So what you're seeing in your list is a DIY templates. They're the starting point for then being able to drag and drop all the things you need. So they're a little bit different to the standard and drill down reports because they're a little bit more locked down. And then what we're also providing is recipes, which is showing you how to build maybe really commonly required DIY reports. If we hear that you guys are all asking for the same thing, we'll create a new recipe and then let everybody know. Here, as always, with reports, it'll be under reports, accountability and reports. Only administrator permissions will normally be able to see this. And you can see all this. We've got the standard reports scrolling down. We've got drill downs, and a subset of drill downs are DIY. So if we just want to find DIY templates, which is what these are, we can just write DIY and filter it. And again, these are the starters. You'll see this one was created by someone in a test environment. So that's been a copy of something. So they've built something and saved it. I'll do a separate video on saving and also being able to allow permissions of certain, say, workers to see particular reports. We'll do another video on that. I'll hand you over now to James Oakerby. He's going to walk you through some of these things in a little more detail.
So if you've been paying close attention, you might have noticed there are actually a few different DIY reports that you can choose from. So the logical question that you're going to ask is, well, which DIY report should I be choosing? The way to choose between different DIY reports is generally based on their name. But to choose it, you need to understand a little bit about how class is set up and the structure of class. As most of you are probably aware, there are two different main sides of class. There's the clients and the services attached to the clients. For anything generally relating to those, you want the service client report. That's the report that you'll tend to use more often than any others. Now, there are things that sit outside of that. For instance, if you need to do anything with services to the community, or projects as they're referred to in class, you'll need the project service actions report. Those are the big three. But there are some that split off from those. Splitting off from clients, we've got the additional details report. That's for various other names of the client, potentially old addresses, other contact numbers, or old email addresses. And then of services, we've got additional parties to prevent you getting your clients and your additional parties mixed up. And we've got some information based off actions. And then based off all the actions, we've also got a separate report for critical dates for those of you who need to run specifically on critical dates. And finally, we have two more. We've got documents attached to services and documents attached to clients. So at the moment, that makes 9 different DIY reports.
Okay, so now James is going to walk us through 2 example reports and really show us the breadth and variety of things that we can do in these DIYs. Typically, we've got these kinds of number of reports, or sum reports as we call them, and then we also can have more complex list views, and we can show you what kind of grouping you can do. So let's begin with a report that's a little more focused on a count or a number of, a sum report.
So here we're going to create some DIY reports. I'm going to start us on the DIY service client report. Now I'll give us a little bit of extra space, and I'll shrink down that menu bar, and I'll start by putting in some basic information. I'll put the start date to about a year ago, and I'll run it through to today. There will be other videos on the rolling date range, so please keep an eye out for those. The additional reporting dates is for more complicated reports, but generally you'll want the service date of completed services. That's how all your other reports in the system run so far. We've just added the other options in for senders who needed a little bit more detail. I'll be selecting all of the funding categories in our demo center, and I'll include our custom fields. At the moment, our DIY report doesn't have any fields in it at all. When we're adding fields, what you need to understand is the basic structure of how the DIY reports work. You'll notice there are 4 areas that say you can drop different fields here. We've got drop filter fields here, drop data items here, drop row fields here, and drop column fields here. I'll start by dropping a row field in. You can find the different fields you have available to select from by right-clicking in this top section and going to Show Field List. It's quite small when you first open up, but if you go down to the right-hand corner, you can just click and drag and expand it out, and then you can move it around a little bit. So I'll start by dragging in gender. All you need to do here is find the section that you'll be dragging it into. For us, that's the rows field. And then we just click and drag. Now I'll run the report, and you can see the information that we'll get so far. So you'll notice that we don't have very much helpful information yet. It's not actually telling us anything except having a few different options listed for gender. I'll add something into the columns field. This is the same process as before. We right-click, go to Show Field List, and it's come up exactly where it was. Into the columns field, I'm going to add disability status. Now that I've closed that, you'll notice we have a lot more options under the disability status. However, it still doesn't have any useful information. And that's because we haven't dropped in any data items. We haven't told the report what we want it to be looking for yet. The 2 most common data items that you'll use are number of clients and number of services. But different reports have different data items that you can add. To add a data item, you just go into the field list again and scroll down to the field you're looking for. For this one, I'm going to choose the number of clients. I just click and drag to where it says drop data items here. And if I close this, you'll now notice we've actually got some numbers coming up. The information here is all good and helpful, but what if we wanted to limit the scope of what we were seeing? Well, we can filter down what we're looking at. If we right-click, pull up the field list one more time, and scroll down to service type. I'll click and drag service type up into the filter fields, and I'll close the pivot grid field list. You'll notice that none of the information has changed yet. That's because anything in this filter section here won't change the data until you apply the filters to it. So this funnel icon, or the champagne glass, if you click on that, it will bring up the various service types that this data is pulling from. You might not want it for all service types. For instance, you might decide that you don't need to know all of this for information services, or perhaps for referral services. You only want it for the full services delivered. I just deselect the 2 options and click OK. And you'll notice we've got a lot less information in the system now. What we've been able to do here is compare the disability status to the gender of the client entered into the system.
Okay, so that report's now looking good. And if we wanted to keep that report, of course, we'd go up to the purple Save As icon and save that report, rename it. I recommend you create a good naming convention for your center so you can search these. As you can imagine, these could start building up very quickly. So you want to be able to find them with a consistent naming convention. Yeah, and then you save it and you can come back and open this anytime you like or go and edit it again another time. All right, so now we'll go to a different kind of report. James is going to look at maybe more a traditional list view, but also explain some of the grouping options.
Let's try looking at a different report. I'm going to reopen the service client report so that we can start from a blank slate. I didn't save any of the old information, so it looks just like it did when I first started. I'll start by adding in the relevant dates, and I'll take all funding categories again. Now I'm going to move a little bit faster this time and add in all the fields I'll need at once. I'll start with the data item, which for this one, I'll use the number of services. And this time, I won't use any filter fields. I also won't be using any columns. All of the fields I add from this point on will go into the row fields area. So I'm going to start with service ID. If I loaded the report now, it would just give me a list of all the service IDs between the 1st of September 2017 and today. But maybe I want to split up these services by something that I can't do in search services. Perhaps the main language that the client attached to these services speaks at home. So I'll drag this main language spoken at home field to the left of service ID. I drag it to the left because I want to be grouping the service IDs by the main language spoken at home. But maybe that's not all I want. Maybe I want to go further to group all of the languages spoken at home by the age group of the client. So I'll select age group at time of service and drag that all the way to the left again. And I'll load the report. The first results that come up will be services attached to clients who don't have their age listed in the system. They also don't have a main language spoken at home listed in the system. But if you scroll down, you start to find different age groups by the language that they are speaking. If you wanted to filter this data, you don't have to use the filter fields section. You can click on the champagne glass for any of the fields that have one, for instance, main language spoken at home, and I'll remove our blank options. Now I've got a list of service IDs split up by the main language they speak at home in the different age group brackets.
So I'll just clarify further some of the interesting things that James has just done. He's grouped by the field age group at time of service because that is the far left column. And that is actually kind of like the operator. This report starts by looking at the breakdown of those age groups, and then it says, well, how many different people from different languages, and then finally it breaks down to a third level, the service ID. If you say swapped the main language spoken at home to the far left with age group at time of service, then you just have a full list of the languages, and then the languages themselves would be broken down by the different age groups. So you can see by this way that the order matters. This shows you can get quite creative. All right, so that's basically all we had to show as a basic intro. Where do you get more information? Well, as always, it's the Class Online Guide. Click on that from your dashboard. So click over here on reporting and accountability, and down inside here we have your DIY do-it-yourself reports. We walk through all the basics here, and importantly this is where we hide away all the recipes, and there'll be more and more coming as we go, but you can follow these. There'll be videos for most of these, typical things like worker caseload reports or enhanced search services or search clients, etc. And as I said, if you've got any more recipe ideas, do give Help Desk a holler. All right, Krista Bro and James Oakerby signing off.